Good morning. I will now convene the regular meeting of the Board of Lane County Commissioners for Tuesday, July 30th, 2024. Welcome to everyone joining us here in Harris Hall and to anyone watching online. We will jump right in and first check to see with our acting administrator, Mr. Rickoff. Good morning. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
Chair Trieger, there are no adjustments to the agenda.
From the board? Seeing none. Any emergency business this morning? No.
This morning.
Then we will move right into public comment. At this time, I have just 2 people signed up here in Harris Hall. I will call your names in order. When I do, please step to the podium, state your full name for the record. Keep your eye on the clock on the wall. You'll have 3 minutes, which will begin when you do state your name. After hearing from folks here in Harris Hall, I'll turn it over to Tanya to see if there's anyone signed up to give comment this morning before the board online. So the first person signed up this morning is Sharon Goodpasture, who will be followed by David Eigel. Welcome and good morning.
I have a handout for you guys.
You can leave it on the staff table and they'll make sure we get a copy. Thank you.
My name is Shannon Erica Goodpasture Lair. My roots run very deep in this community. My great-great-grandfather homesteaded in this area, but anyway, and sorry for my voice. So me and my family have struggled to recover from the Holiday Farm fire, COVID-19 pandemic, and loss of employment and income due to restructuring of our family business and a recent death of my mother. During all the preceding incidents, there were clear objectives and hurdles managed with the aid and assistance of government agencies and close community members. After all the aforementioned, I was knocked off guard by Lane County Management's order to comply on such short notice with little outline of any objectives to remedy our plight, other than to threaten a horrendous fine of $2,000 a day or evacuate our property immediately. The whole situation came about under questionable circumstances, and the compliance order's initial complaint indicates a potential collusion aimed to taking over our property. Introduction. And my current status: on the 8th day of July, I was unexpectedly served with an order to comply from Lane County Management. This order was issued on short notice and lacked a detailed outline of any objectives or remedies to address our situation. The only options presented were to face an exorbitant fine of $2,000 a day or to evacuate our property immediately, which would render us homeless. Questionable circumstances. The circumstances surrounding the issuance of this compliance order are questionable. The initial complaint within the compliance order indicates a potential collusion aimed at unlawfully taking over our property. Relief sought. Given the lack of clarity, the potential ulterior motives, and the severe impact of this order would have on my family and me, I respectfully request that the order to comply be reviewed and considered. I seek a fair and transparent resolution that addresses our situation without resorting to undue financial penalties. Revoke the current order, provide a clear, detailed outline of any legitimate objectives, and ensure that any action taken are fair, transparent, and consider the significant hardships of my family. And I have adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is David Eigel.
I'm David Eigel. I was appalled by what I saw this past week in terms of this, quote, apology for the white racism that led to the shutting down of the North Bank Village. The problem is, the story people have been told is absolute nonsense. So, with a quick quote from Horace Mann, if an idiot were to tell you the same story every day for a year, you would end by believing it. This fake history about these evil white racists who drove away these happy people on the North Bank, it would take some time to go into all the misrepresentations of history. But the key thing is, the basic story you were told and that Commissioner Trieger was apologizing for never happened. The authentic history of the North Bank settlers were quite simple. We had the Great Depression, followed by World War II. We had a 15-year period in the United States where there was grossly inadequate residential housing being built. As a result, there was an acute housing shortage that went on for years across the country. In 1952, when my parents moved here, my father had a great job, college educated, and as my mother said, the only reason they could rent a house was because he knew somebody. The area, the North Bank settlement, was not a happy place. It was unsanitary. Just one quick quote. Rodent Control Officer Donald Dickey comment, "It's a potentially serious rat problem. Going to such natural breeding grounds as nearby woodpiles, open garbage, the ground, nearby chemical works, and the general trash about the area." The problem was that in addition to that, this whole area was a floodplain. And until the mid-60s, this whole area in Eugene would flout. The airport would be closed. Schools would be closed. You can see pictures of kids riding around their bicycles under, with a bunch of water. That area flooded out in February of 1949, and the head of the Lane County Red Cross was very complimentary to the mayor of the city of Eugene because of his coordination of evacuation efforts and finding housing for the people there. This story about all this hatred and racism, destroying a wonderful community that never existed, is not appropriate. And apologies need to be made to this community now for what's been done this past week. I've given you a lot of information. I'll send you more. And you can have it right out of the newspaper. I didn't make this stuff up. Please take action on this. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. That concludes everyone who is on the sign-in sheet in Harris Hall this morning. I'll turn it over to Tanya to see if there's anyone signed up online. Tanya, do we have anyone wishing to present testimony before the board this morning?
Thank you, Chair. If you are online and would like to give public comment at the Board of County Commissioners meeting for July 30th, please raise your virtual hand. I do not see anyone raising their virtual hand, so I will return back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who arrived after the sign-in sheet was handed up in Harris Hall who wishes to give public comment? Sir, please step to the podium. State your full name for the record. When you do, your 3 minutes will begin. There's a clock on the wall. And welcome and good morning.
Basket, I would have thought you would know my name by now. I've been here so many times. Apologize for being a few minutes late. I got to work, so it's sometimes a little tough to get down here every Tuesday morning to visit with you folks. Okay, I just want to go in again with my property over on the McKenzie River. Once again, I just want to safely build a home on my property. And as you are aware, as I've said several times, I hired an engineer to help me show that that is possible, and he did. And it was proven 3 different times now that I can safely build a piece of property. And just a little bit of background on water, which I guess I should just say this. Water does what water's going to do. It goes wherever it wants to go. And if I build a house and the river's right here, and I build a house above that, and everyone else's house is up here, when the water hits my house, it'll wash it away. How is it possible that my house can affect a house up here? That's what we're looking at. That's why they stopped me from building. That's how silly this is. Just a little FYI. Real quickly, I hired the engineer and he showed exactly how it could be done very easily and safely. The property is completely in a floodway. This is the reason for the exemption that you guys had in your rules. That if it's completely in the floodway and I can safely show that a person can build a home there, doesn't affect anybody else, doesn't affect the river, I'm okay to do so. So that's what we did. But they denied me. What happened is the county develops the code. It basically follows the code. It addresses it, adds and subtracts, it makes changes, and it updates, which I'm not sure what an update to the code means. They couldn't define it for me when I asked 2 weeks ago. they do this under the guise of acting like other counties. We're following the state, we're following the federal guidelines, we're trying to realign ourselves so we match up with these other entities, the other counties. It's funny they say that because the last time they made their big changes and I sat there and tried to say and give this information, they took that exemption out. Yet every other county has it in theirs. Why is that? I thought they were realigning to match up with everybody else. That's a little confusing to me. They also took out the appeal process years ago. And they've been asked to change that many, many times. Yet we all ignore it because we're stuck listening to land use, handpick a hearings official that we have to listen to instead of coming to the people that we elected to make that final decision on what we can do. It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't follow the guidelines that they say in their updates they're trying to do. To back up, that's what I told you about a month ago, was that county official, when I first started, before I spent a penny.
Thank you for your public comment. Your time has expired.
I
Thank
still
you.
got pages. Guess I'll be back.
That concludes.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. That concludes public comment for this morning. And with that, I will turn it over to the board for any commissioner's response to public comment and/or other remonstrance. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate everybody that came out to speak today, and knowing it is a Tuesday morning, it's challenging for a lot of people to come. So just a reminder, you can always write into us at any time. Thank you, Ms. Goodpasture. We had a moment to chat before the meeting, and happy to follow up with you. One thing that I did want to speak about today was wildfire. Since our last board meeting, clearly wildfires in our community have grown in number and size. In the East Lane District alone, there are more than 15 separate individual wildfires going. And in South Lane, 5 of them merged into one pretty big one. This continues to be a real challenge on our landscape. We have thousands of wildfires firefighters in Oregon. Millions and millions of dollars are going towards resources in order to help fight these wildfires. Unfortunately, there are much larger wildfires in other counties adjacent to us, and pretty serious ones on the east side of the state where resources are going. This is the first time in my experience that there have been this many individual wildfires going on in East Lane. They are now combined into what we call complexes. So a group of them is considered a complex. There are 3 different complexes of fires that are going on, and there are meetings all day long of all the activity that is happening. That is the first time in my experience that I have ever had more than one complex at a time. I am rotating my time between the individual complexes and trying to adjust to the ones that are the most urgent. Luckily, many of them are far away from the majority of the population, but there are still people out there living in individual homesteads close to these fires. There are people camping, and there are people traveling through that otherwise might not be aware that roads are closed in many of these locations. So I urge the public to ensure that you look at whether the roads are open before you take off into those areas or nearby those areas. There are applications online to help you do that. Lane County, of course, has at the top of our main webpage an area to look for evacuations. There are people in level 1s across the county. But if you live in a rural area, you should pretty much always live at a level 1, especially during fire season. It's just a smart thing to do. And unfortunately, we did lose yet another wildfire firefighter in a plane crash on the eastern side of the state. I think that's the sixth one in a series of wildfire years that we've had recently. And it's devastating. It's devastating to hear that somebody has passed fighting fires on our behalf. It's devastating to their family, and it's devastating to those that are working with them at the time. So my heart and thoughts definitely go out to that family. We should be aware that they are putting themselves on the line each and every single day, that they are out there, and many of these people are coming from out of state, not necessarily from Oregon, and doing this on our behalf to save the lives of those nearby and their livelihoods. So please be diligent when you go out, and if you know people nearby, please check in with them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take a moment to follow up on that. When I was in the 6th grade, I emigrated to America. We took a train from Sheffield to Liverpool, a ship from Liverpool to New York, a Greyhound bus from New York to Portland, and then we took a Volkswagen from Portland to Tillamook. That was a great adventure for an 11-year-old. As you can well imagine, saw so many things. The thing that stood out the most to me on that 8,000-mile journey was the last 50 miles driving through the Tillamook burn. Starting at Gales Creek and almost all the way to Tillamook was nothing but stumps of burned trees and forests being replanted. But it really stood out. I could not believe something of that magnitude that took place over 3 different conflagrations years and years ago. To put that in perspective, Tillamook burns, between all 3 major Tillamook burns, covered about 355,000 acres. That's unbelievable, isn't it? We currently have over 1 million acres burning in Oregon, 3 times the size of all the Tillamook burns combined. Commissioner Buck, thank you for being diligent, keeping track. The state and Tiffany Brown, our local, our emergency director or manager here in Lane County, are doing a very good job of keeping us very well informed of each fire, each complex, and the work that's being done. I'm not going to try to elaborate on what Commissioner Buck said regarding the firefighters and the sobering work that is done by them, but boy, we need to think about them at all times, support them in any way we can. And Mr. Rakoff, I know you know the county, all of our resources are fully behind that. Very quickly, I want to talk about Kids First. They had a wonderful event, a fundraiser on Saturday, and a lot of people were there having a really good time. But the thing about it was in support of Kids First. If you don't know what Kids First is, Kids First is it's an advocacy group in Lane County. It's a center for working with kids who are victims or witnesses to crime, particularly sexually involved crime. And these kids are really in a traumatic stage in their life. And I stumble over my words when I even think about trying to talk about Kids First and the heart-rending stories that you hear about Kids First. Please, we support Kids First every single way we can. Their board of commissioners, their board is very strong in the community, and they are doing a remarkable job of being advocacy for the kids who otherwise would not have somebody standing up for them. And 2 last things, good news that I'd like to mention. The Lane County Fair happened over the weekend. I had a chance to go with a range of children starting at 8 down to 5, and that's who you need to go to the fair with. If you're not going to the fair with kids, you don't really understand how cool it is. I'd like to really call out Corey Buller and the entire fair staff for the wonderful job that was done this year. A great fair, especially Sunday when it was 73 degrees. Everybody was having a great time. And my final thing, Chair Trieger, you might guess, we all look through the back window right there, and there's a really remarkable Lane County Farmers Market happening right now. Every Tuesday I go get fresh berries. If you don't get fresh berries today, you are missing out. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Seneca.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Goodpasture, Mr. Basket, I just want to say I really do appreciate you guys coming in and explaining your story to us. And if we don't hear from you guys, we don't know that we have these concerns with LMD. So thank you for taking your time, especially, both of you live a ways away, but I mean, that's a long haul, so it means a lot to us for you to show up. And Commissioner Buck, thank you. That was a great description. Last night I was speaking with our PIO, and as we're talking about how low we are on resources and the extent of these fires, another meeting happens, and so it just is nonstop right now. And sitting here, you want to do more, but there's no more resources out there right now. It's kind of a scary time. And I'd like to take a second also to thank our sheriff's department during these events, if you will, because our sheriff's department is they're overworked as it is, and they're spread thin, and so this really adds to their plate too. I'd just like to take a second to thank everybody that goes up to these campgrounds in the middle of the smoke and clears them out and makes sure people aren't where they shouldn't be. It kind of reminds me of back when I was on the United Front. Chief Caven was telling me a story about being trapped up in Blue River, and you just start thinking about that story, and it gives you chills right now. So keep these people in your prayers, and we can do this, Lane County. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, David Eigel, interesting history. I'm interested to hear more about that. Obviously, you always bring us some interesting things. And Keith and Sharon, yeah, those complaints need to be heard. Again, thank you. And I echo the words of Commissioner Senega on that. We need to hear those things, and we get feedback from Public Works and LMD, and there's conversations that go on behind the scenes. So don't think we're not doing something on your behalf when you're not here, because that goes on. And Commissioner Buck, great presentation on the fire. All of that concerns us greatly, obviously, from the perspective of our constituents in Springfield. Our timber fallers and loggers are wanting to get back out in the forest and manage those timber properties better, so these fires aren't a normal thing of every year. It was interesting this morning, too, that our past emergency preparedness person, Patience Winningham, was on the radio, and she was saying how also the emergency preparedness people are stressed beyond their capacities, because typically they were folks who trained for the one epic event that happened maybe every 5 or 10 years, not 3 events that happen every single year. So we need to keep those folks in mind too, as they're tasked beyond their capacities as well, of all the resources that they have to deal with to try to fight all these things. And lastly, I want to say I've been involved with the Charter Review Committee the last couple of meetings on Friday and yesterday, and I want to just express my sincere gratitude to those folks for the hard work and passionate input that they're putting on this potentially and past controversial issue with the redistricting committees to make them more independent. It seemed many people came forward and were expressing hostilities and concerns and things that just were facts that maybe weren't well played out. But I want to say this is what I've noticed about the Charter Review Committee, and I respect them greatly for this, is they took on the challenge of taking this information that had been sitting on the desks of our staff for 4 years. So now they had all the tools of which they could deal with to work the redistricting committee in a more independent fashion. And when people come together at the table and talk about their differences and dissect an idea and make it work for the good of everyone, that's democracy. And I saw that in action in spades over the last 2 days. And they've also committed to have 2 more meetings. So they're committing 8 hours to this work in the short time period that the board has asked them to do this work. And I just want to commend them for their service, commend them for their time, and commend Chairman Rowe for just doing a great job on that committee. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Well, I will just add to the chorus of appreciation and also warnings about the fire on the landscape and the strain it puts on the communities, first and foremost, that are experiencing, whether it's smoke inundation or actual threat of fire, but also on the resources, not only of our first responders, but emergency managers more broadly. Not only are these the highest number of fires, but it's the earliest we've seen. I mean, we really don't usually have this level of fire activity and intensity when we haven't even quite yet turned the calendar page to the month of August yet. So it's really concerning, and we are not the only state experiencing this. And as Commissioner Buck mentioned, firefighters travel all over the country and go where they're needed. And so the resources are just unbelievably strained and over capacity everywhere, and crews are moving around from state to state. But we have already less resource than we need to fight the fire we have on the landscape now. And as those fires grow and new ones start, and other states are experiencing this, it's we are in for some very challenging weeks until the rains come back in October. So thank you to everyone working, and all my best wishes for safety to all. I just want to also appreciate constituents who came to speak about land management, and I know both of you folks, both Ms. Goodpasture and Mr. Basquette, if you're still here, you are. I know land management staff has responded, and they keep us informed and provide clarity and background information we might need as to the situations that you're both facing. And I know our land management manager, Mr. Miller, has been in touch with both of you to try to help sort it out and help you navigate where it's possible to get some resolution. So thank you to you for bringing this to our attention, but also I want the public to know that our staff, which is where this work lives, is absolutely on top of this and has been nothing but responsive and clear in their communications on both of these cases and all the others that folks bring before us. So thank you for that. With that, and seeing no other comment from the board, we will move on to the consent calendar. This is a list of items that are considered routine and therefore don't require any conversation with the board or presentation from staff. All the materials that we have available to us in considering these items are available to the public online. And so with that, I would look for a motion.
Chair, I move to accept and adopt the consent calendar for Tuesday, July 30th, 2024.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck to adopt today's consent calendar. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all. We have one wonderful item before us, and then we do have a 10 o'clock time certain. So if this next item doesn't take the full 30 minutes, I'll ask the administrator to think about whether there's some filler items we could do to take us to that 10 a.m. But with that, we have an item from Human Resources. This is an order before us in the matter of approving a tentative agreement between Lane County and what we call FAPO, our Federation of Parole and Probation Officers. So I'll welcome to the table Inga Wood, our Labor Relations Manager, and Andrea Nagels from our Office of County Counsel. Good morning. Thanks for being here. I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. We are pleased to bring before you today the tentative agreement for the FAPO Collective Bargaining Agreement that stands for the Federation of Parole and Probation Officers. This unit represents approximately 33 officers that work within the Parole and Probation Office. Following the priorities, goals, and objectives that were established by this board, this county's bargaining team began bargaining with FAPO's team in January of this year. The parties used a process called interest-based bargaining in order to reach an agreement that involved training sessions on the process and then moving into a facilitated process, working together to discuss topics and issues that were brought forth by the party. We were able to reach a tentative agreement through this process on all of the non-economic items under the contract, and we also successfully used the interest-based bargaining process to reach a tentative agreement on the economic pieces, and we were able to accomplish that in one single day. Under the tentative agreement, the total estimated additional cost for the contract changes is a range between approximately $1,077,839 to $1,532,483, and again, that's over a 3-year period. There is a cost range there because the cost of living adjustments or COLAs for each of the 3 years of the contract are based on the Consumer Price Index. That's the CPIU West Region Index that we're looking at. And we're looking at an annual average of that with a minimum of a 2% and then a maximum of a 5%. And when we're looking at that CPI and that calculation, we're looking at what the previous calendar year CPI was. So for example, for the first year of this contract for fiscal year 24-25, we were looking at the annual average CPI for the calendar year of 2023, which was 4.3%. So if the tentative agreement is approved by the board, employees represented by this contract in year 1 will receive a 4.3% cost of living adjustment, and that will be retroactive to the first full pay period following July 1st, 2024. Additionally, what the tentative agreement included was a 1 grade increase, and that's approximately a 2.5% wage increase, and that would take place in the second year of the contract. We also agreed to a $50 increase per week to the on-call pay that these officers receive, and then an additional $50 towards reimbursement for safety equipment, and that $50 is over the life of the contract. I'll turn it over to Inga to talk a little bit more about some of the economic items.
Thanks, Andrea. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. In order to help control current and future costs related to our health plans, which we know is a big priority for the board and for the county, FAPO has agreed to some changes to the healthcare plans. We will provide all new employees hired after January 1st, 2025, access to our high deductible health plan and the Plus plan only. Employees hired before that date will still have access to both of those plans and retain access to the copay plan, but should they leave the copay plan in the future, they will not be able to return to it. So phasing out that copay plan eventually, which is our highest cost plan. Under the Plus plan and the copay plan, specialty drugs will require a 30% coinsurance up to $100 employee maximum, and the copay amount for specialist office visits will increase to $50. All plans will cover generic preferred drugs, with brand name drugs covered only when medically required by the employee's physician. Employees and their spouses who use tobacco products will pay a monthly surcharge of $25 per month per person. The annual out-of-pocket maximum is increasing for all plans, and the ability for an employee to receive full funding of the high deductible health plan deductible into their health savings account or their health reimbursement account will be dependent upon completion of an annual health risk assessment, which means that the employees still have the option to have that high deductible health plan deductible fully funded, but it requires an additional health risk assessment for them to get that fully funded. There are no changes to the monthly contributions employees make towards their health insurance, which currently ranges between $0 to $70 per month, depending on which plan and level selected and whether the employee completes the health risk assessment to receive that $20 monthly credit.
So the tentative agreement is for a 3-year contract, so it would expire on June 30th of 2027. I'm happy to report that the FAPO membership has voted on the tentative agreement, and they have voted to ratify the contract. The county's bargaining team members and Assistant County Administrator Greg Rickoff are all in support of the recommendation to approve the tentative agreement. I would like to take a moment to provide thank you to everyone who participated in the negotiation process, including the members of FAPO's bargaining team. That's Joe Swope, Jeff Bunn, Matt Taylor, Rick Picorni, and their attorney Seth Davis. And from the county's bargaining team, we had Greg Rickoff, Donovan Dumeyer, Inga Wood, Kim Fulton, Sean Hoban, Michelle Swancutt, Carrie Crabtree, Christine Moody, Eliza Kaczynski, James Trujillo, Jennifer Violette, and Kristen Mayfair. And a special thank you to Kristen Mayfair for serving as our facilitator through this process, and that was by mutual agreement from the parties. And we do have some folks in the audience today from Parole and Probation that I definitely want to say thank you for being here today. We have Jeff Bunn, Officer Jeff Bunn, Donovan Dumeyer, Manager, and I thought I saw Sean Hoban is back there, Supervisor Sean Hoban. That's all that I have, unless, Greg, you would like to make some comments.
Just a few quick comments. The importance of interest-based bargaining cannot be overstated. This really is an opportunity to take people from their stuck positions and move them to the larger interests. We've done this twice now, and I would say both sides of the table, and really in interest-based bargaining, we're all on the same side of the table. We support this wholeheartedly. It allows us the space to be curious, to understand what's behind the interests, the concerns. It gives us a chance to be curious with one another, to focus on where we disagree, but also where we get confused. A lot of time spent in real clarification down to definitions, and it reaffirms everything that we do agree on. So at the end of the day, at the end of the contract, it brings humor, a sense of cooperation, and it leaves us a healthier organization than when we started. If you think about bargaining adding strength and understanding to the teams. That really is a remarkable change, a remarkable difference. We really do have a remarkable team. I want to thank Andrea, Inga, and particularly Kristen. I did want to offer Donovan Dumeyer, our manager who directs the adult community corrections, as well as Jeff Bunn, an outstanding officer. You'll see him, he's our officer assigned to the Behavioral Health Treatment Court, which is a remarkable piece in and of itself, and he's absolutely worth taking out for a cup of coffee to understand the quality of that work. And I wanted to give them a chance to say anything if they wanted to jump in here.
Jeff Bunn, FOPO Vice President.
You could come to the microphone.
Appreciate those kind words, Greg. Just echoing the sentiments around interest-based bargaining. I find that it really amounts to a contract that represents everyone involved. So it's not something that gets, kind of shopped out and comes back and we go back and forth on. It's a piece of everyone's concerns, and so I appreciate us being able to do that. And thank you all for your time.
Yes, good morning. I would echo both Greg and Jeff, and having been a part of the previous bargaining process, the interest-based bargaining is just much more collaborative, it's transparent, and we're really able to have some really candid conversations about kind of the interests and the needs of the division and our employees and the health and wellness. And we know that they are our most important asset in really performing the work and meeting our mission. So really echo the interest-based bargaining process. Just been an incredible process to be a part of. So, and special thanks to Kristen Mayfair for her work in putting this together and really bringing us together when we needed to be. It's so easy, as you can imagine, to get lost in the weeds on some of the topics, and so she did just a superb job in keeping us moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. That's all we have.
Great. Thank you so much to staff, and thank you to everyone who joined us in the audience today from the unit and from the team who made this, got us this point. So I'll turn it over to the board for any questions, comments. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Trigger. I'm going to tag on to the last. There's a lot said, but I want to point out the fact that a great facilitator facilitates great meetings. And Kristen, that's not the first time I've heard that about you. That particularly with interest-based bargaining, where so much is happening at the same time, and everybody listens to everybody. I'd love to hear more about it because I've tried to type down the quotes from you, Officer Bunn, from you, Mr. Dumeyer, and from you, Greg. Didn't quite get them all, but you're elaborating on the importance of interest-based bargaining and how it cannot be understated, and more and more and more. So, well done bringing us to this point, and let's run this at the flagpole and try to beacon upon it. Well done. Thank you.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to give a huge thank you to the FOPO members, just not only for this particular process, but just in general for working for Lane County. You're so integral to what we do here, especially in the public safety realm, and with its intersection, mental health and housing and all these different areas at once. It's a very unique position to have, and we really highly value what you do. I just want to give you a huge thank you for working for Lane County.
Commissioner Senega.
Yes, I think everything was very well said. Kudos to everybody. I just wanted to take a second to thank the parole and probation officers and supervisors to let you guys know how much you're appreciated. We know what you guys are dealing with day in and day out, and it truly is appreciated. Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Change is hard, but you guys negotiate change better than anybody I know, you and your staff, so thank you for doing that. The only thing I could think of in my mind, and you have to go where my mind is that in that movie Taken, Liam Neeson says, I have a certain set of skills. And so I thought of you guys when I thought of that you have a certain set of skills, which we appreciate very much, so good job.
Well, I'll just add my voice to the chorus of appreciation to staff, but particularly to unit members, not only for engaging in this really difficult, challenging work, that you do on behalf of Lane County and that you don't always know how it ultimately resolves, right? You're working with folks with a lot of challenges, and once they're released from your supervision, they're out there in the world. So I hope you know, for most of them, you've, if not all, made a real difference in their lives and improved their lives, and therefore the lives of their family and everyone else that they interact with. But I also want to thank you for engaging in interest-based bargaining. I'm really excited as we do that more and more here, to hopefully have anyone, if not eventually all of our 7 other units, consider engaging in that process, because it really does seem to lead not only to a great contract, but that the process itself, as I often say, the process is one of the outcomes. The process itself leads to just better relationships and more of a sense of we're all part of one organization, because everybody at the table understands the totality of the organization. They're bringing their particular interests, but they understand where it fits in the whole organization. So really valuable to have you all have used the IBB process, and thank you for that too. Great. With that, I will turn it over to staff to see if there are any other comments or concluding remarks before we consider a motion for the order before us. Seeing none, to the board.
Staff, I'd like to move to approve order number 24073005 in the matter of approving the tentative agreement between Lane County and the Federation of Parole and Probation Officers.
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve the order. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Approval of order 24-07-30-05 in the matter of approving a tentative agreement between Lane County and the Federation of Parole and Probation Officers. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes item 6 on the agenda, and we do have a 10 a.m. time certain, but about 18 minutes before we get there. So I'm looking to the administrator for any adjustments or opportunities for filler
We have
items.
the ever agile Steve Adams here who can bifurcate his presentation. I'm going to step away for a moment. We have Homes for Good in the building, and they have a timely matter for me, so I'll be back with you momentarily.
Thank you. Then I will welcome our Policy Director, Steve Adams, to the table. And so if I understand, you're going to do your presentation on the Legislative Committee update, and then we'll come back after our 10 a.m. for any response, discussion, and consideration of the order. Is that right?
Chair Traeger, we may be able to fully complete this item before your time certain.
What we can do.
And perhaps even the one following.
Ambitious. I like
Good morning, Chair Traeger, Vice Chair Lovell, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be before you. So this is what is now our attempt to be before you on a quarterly basis, on a regular and predictable basis, to discuss amendments on the legislative principles and priorities document. This is the living document that really needs to be updated on a very regular basis as we take in new information, as we take in new issues, and really understand how staff can advocate on behalf of this board before both the United States Congress as well as the Oregon Legislative Assembly. So on the 10th of July, the Legislative Committee met to evaluate the most recently amended legislative principles and priorities. It was that was previously amended just after the short session concluded earlier this year. Specifically, staff recommended for that committee a series of housekeeping amendments, as it were, but certainly some adjustments that I think are really important for our work moving forward. So specifically, in the packet is both the order as well as the official document with kind of a color coding of yellow and green indicating how we're editing the document. So specifically, the recommendations for the amendments to the legislative principles and priority include supporting weighted funding allocations for the next biennial Community Corrections Act, meaning that additional dollars would be provided for more challenging cases to manage managed as opposed to less managing cases challenged, and an increase in the biennial appropriation of the Community Corrections Act. So we made some adjustments based upon some of the fiscal considerations statewide going into the short session, which now are changing just because the head count is changing and now positioning ourselves for 2025. We added a priority item regarding support for funding for renovations for the Lane County Circuit Court facilities, as we are not certain that there's an opportunity here, but we think there may be. So we want to put this in a proper posture so staff can continue to see what's possible for 2025. We had staff suggested adding support for funding for the behavioral health deflection services for the biennium ahead. So this, of course, is the Measure 110 reform legislation that passed during the short session, and so just kind of shifting our posture there. And we eliminated from our priority list a statement that said broadly, eliminate our support for ongoing Measure 110 reform efforts. We don't believe that is likely to be a top-tier priority in the 2025 session, but elsewhere within the document, we have lots of policy language and guidance to staff on representing this board's interest in ensuring that the considerable investment that state government and local government, certainly Wayne County, is making at the moment in standing up this new behavioral health deflection process is well funded as we go into the next biennium. We added support for ongoing funds for the non-federal Medicaid match for family child health home visitation programs. So we had just a one-time measure in the priorities document previously. We're expanding this to make it a little bit more generic and calling out that the legislature treats this differently. State government provides the match for all Medicaid covered services except for this one, and we've historically provided those matching funds for general fund. The legislature did provide a one-time patch for us that was very beneficial, and we hope to see that kind of be treated more broadly. So there's ongoing work and a table discussing that piece as we go. We added support for the OASIS-led effort to increase instrument recording fees at the county level for each county's efforts at public land corner preservation fund. So this has to do with surveying and related to preserving those monuments out in the field that surveyors use to be able to do the calculations. We included a priority for supporting continued federal funding for the federally qualified health centers and the 340B program in opposing legislations likely at the federal level, but perhaps at the state level, that would restrict 340B medication access. So this is a program at the federal level that we partake of here locally that enables us to generate revenue from pharmaceuticals that we have access to and are able to prescribe through our federally qualified healthcare centers. And so there's often within the pharmaceutical industry efforts to try to restrict those funds to kind of capture some of those dollars back. And we would like to be able to continue to invest that revenue into the provision of healthcare for nearly 30,000 people in Wayne County. We've added a request for a congressionally directed spending for medication-assisted treatment facility in Florence. We are looking at additional grant opportunities to try to fund this for Director Gray, but we have authorization to move that forward when the next window opens. We made an elimination for a previous priority item, support for the enhanced budgetary flexibility for local transient lodging tax revenue. Now, I'm chagrined to say that this showed up twice in the last document. This is a clerical error, and I'm just striking one of them. That priority remains. So I messed that up, sorry. And then finally, eliminated support for repurposing the past $5 million bond revenue for Wayne County Courthouse replacement. So our former Intergov Affairs manager, Kyler, thought there may be some previously appropriated money in state government that we could use for local purposes. We've since had the opportunity to drill into that, and it no longer exists.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
The second bullet on your list added support for funds for renovations of circuit court facilities. How is that different from the repurposing the pass bond? Or how do those
Thank
relate to
you.
each other?
The elimination at the end was very specific to what we thought might be 2016 money that is no longer there. And the second bullet goes to potentially newly appropriated dollars in the 25 session should the judiciary choose to move that forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. And so, Chair Trieger, that is the totality of the changes that staff have brought to the board.
Great. Then I do have one other question, but I'll turn it over to the board first to see if there are other questions or comments from the board for Mr. Adams. Commissioner Farr.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Adams. Did we do all that in that short meeting? Amazing.
Chair Trieger, we did, Commissioner. We were very efficient.
It wasn't so short, but it was a lot of items covered. Thank you.
So my one other question, thank you, Commissioner, is the added request for the MAT facility in Florence. That would be a county, potentially, if the funding were to come through, another county facility like we have here in Eugene. Yes?
That is correct.
And complementary to any of the mobile street response, mobile medical that we're talking about providing.
Indeed.
And has there been any conversation, or might there be with any, we have some really successful private providers of medicated assisted treatment. Has there been any discussion or conversation with them about opportunities for partnering with any private providers of those services with perhaps any kind of county support? Or it just occurred to me as I was reading that could be a pathway for Florence to get the program in place.
Indeed, Chair. And I think there's multiple pathways for moving this. So I think this item was brought forward by Director Gray, and I would certainly defer to her on the state of the conversations with private providers and different pathways. I know we're supporting Director Gray and thinking about funding sources other than a congressionally directed spending and looking at timelines for when that can open. There's, of course, opioid dollars at the statewide level that was recently allocated for those services. And I think so. Director Gray, as you know and appreciate, is incredibly savvy, and so certainly I'm sure she's thinking about those items. We wanted to just have this on the priorities list so that we could put this forward when the time came.
Great, thank you for that. Anything else? No. Okay. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. Without any further comments or questions, we do have attendant with this presentation on order.
Chair, I move to adopt the Board Order 24073007 in the matter of adopting the July 2024 Legislative Principles and Priorities document, updated July 10, 2024.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'd love to second that.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's been moved by Vice Chair, seconded by Commissioner Farr. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll just add that I appreciate this coming back to us routinely because it's a sign not only of how dynamic the work is, but that as we move forward with county priorities, we might adjust and elevate or deprioritize. So it's great to have it be such a living document. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair.
With that, I will call for the vote. All those in favor of the order signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Approval of Order 24-07-30-07 in the matter of adopting the July 2024 Legislative Principles and Priorities document before us. Thank you for the presentation. We have just about 5 minutes. Do we want, oh, perfect. This says it's a 5-minute item. So
I don't see Alex, though.
continuing, Mr. Adams.
Yes, we'll continue with Mr. Adams proving his agility.
Indeed, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners, I'm appearing on behalf of my colleague Alex Dreer, who has worked incredibly hard on bringing this item forward. We're grateful for the opportunity. So this next item regarding fiscal year 21, so federal fiscal year 21, Building Resilient Infrastructure for Communities, or BRIC grant from FEMA. So this item will accept a grant award from the Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, Building Resilient Infrastructure for Communities grant. In January of 22, Lane County applied for a fiscal year 21 FEMA BRIC grant on behalf of Blatchley Lane Electric Utility Cooperative, and Wayne County, as the local government with a multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan, is an eligible applicant for these funds, whereas Blatchley Lane was not able to apply directly. Wayne County worked with Blatchley Lane to ensure that we could bring these resources into our community. So this federal grant award of $2.5 million will leverage Blatchley Lane's match commitment of $1.2 million. This grant, specifically the project, will allow Blatchley Lane to replace 91 utility poles near Junction City, directly impacting hundreds of customers in rural unincorporated Wayne County. All customers in the project area are on well water and septic systems. So when electrical lines go down and power is lost, customers lose access to drinking water and the ability to obviously flush toilets. And this poses a significant health risk when extended power outages. So this project will mitigate the negative health outcomes of power outages for this part of Wayne County and promote resiliency in our local rural grid. And so we saw this challenge. This was put forward some time ago. This particular funding mechanism is a good one for Wayne County, and we have a host of projects in the queue for this, but it takes a minute to get through this process. It's a bit of a state-federal dance back and forth, and that's why we're only now getting to this. But we're going to get these dollars over to Blatchley Lane and get this project underway, and we have a lot more to do on our utility grid. Post-ice storm, we saw that issue really come to the top of the table. And huge kudos to my colleague, Alex Dreer, who was the driving force to get this done.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Commissioner Senega.
Yeah, just real quick, I want to say how much we appreciate it. You know, a resilient infrastructure is something that I'm very passionate about. EPUD's right in the middle of rebuilding a huge transmission line. I think this ice storm really showed some of our weaknesses. So this is great news. You've given me a lot of great news about West Lane in the last week or so, and I just want to say I appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to mention how excited I am about these BRIC grants. I've been watching them and seeing how Lane County can take advantage of them more and more. BRIC grants are big federal dollars. This is big money coming into Lane County, and the fact that we are able to now really start applying on a pretty regular schedule, we'll get better and better and better at applying for these things. Is pretty exciting to be able to see all the different types of programs that we can bring in with these federal dollars. So thank you to you and your team for really being on top of it. I know that there's a delay from when we apply to when we eventually get it, so we may, at the board level, forget 2 years down the line that we applied for something and got it, just like this. And it's really exciting to see what we can eventually bring into Lane County. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Well, I will just add my appreciation and say I do remember this coming to us, and I remember talking with the FEMA staff in DC on one of our trips there, and this is just such a great example to raise awareness for the community about the role of county government as being that fulcrum between leverage the federal and state resources down to the local communities, and we're that fulcrum point that can do that leverage on behalf of the communities within our county. This is such a great example of that. And as others have said, but particularly Commissioner Buck, this is just it's just the beginning. And we developed that relationship with the staff at the federal office of FEMA, and they come to understand that we are an entity they can work with to help them achieve their mission and get the money out on the ground. So it's a win all around. So thank you for bringing this to us, and thank you on our behalf. Please convey to Alex Dreer for all of her good work. And so with that, would you like to make the motion, Commissioner Senega, since this is affecting your... You're not required to. I'm just offering the opportunity.
No. Yes. I'd like to move approval of Order 24-07-30-08 in the matter of accepting fiscal year 21 BRIC Community BRIC grant for the United States Department of Homeland Security.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second that.
Been moved by Commissioner Seneca and seconded by the Vice Chair. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Approval of Order 24-07-30-08 in the matter of accepting an FY21 Building Resilient Infrastructure for Communities, or BRIC grant from the United States Department of Homeland Security's Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, for Lane County's Alderwood Looped Power Transmission to increase reliability and resilience, a project in partnership with Blackley Lane Electric Co-op, and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the grant and associated contracts and documents. Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Half-court shot in time.
And there we are, 10:01 for our 10 a.m. time, almost certain. Thank you, everyone. And Cameron, do you have a sign-in sheet for the public hearing? Thank you. And I will take a moment. Staff will reset. I will bring up my script for this hearing. Thank you.
You have the script.
That's for this afternoon. If it was emailed to me, I have it in.
I have it.
Is this the one that came from Kevin? Yeah, I do. Thank you. All right. So this is item 7A from Public Works, a public hearing and consideration of Order 24-07-30-06 in the matter of conducting an on-the-record public hearing with the Board of County Commissioners to consider a remand from the Land Use Board of Appeals on a Board of County Commissioner decision, Order Number 14-06-13-06, that affirmed and adopted the Lane County Hearings Official reconsidered decision dated April 17, 2017, and the letter affirming the decision dated May 2, 2017, as the county's final decision that approved and denied in part the verification and alteration of a non-conforming retreat/educational facility known as Lost Valley Center. This is file number 509-PA13-05201, Lost Valley Center, Inc., and I will turn it over to staff for excuse me just a minute, I will refer back to my script. The purpose of this hearing is to accept evidence and hear arguments limited to the Land Use Board of Appeals, or LUBA, remand decision, final opinion and orders Sankovich et al. Versus Lane County, or LUBA number 2017-064. The board's decision in this matter is subject to criteria cited in the agenda cover memo and the attachments. Testimony and any written evidence or argument must be directed toward the approval criteria on the remanded item only. This remand hearing is limited to the issue remanded or deferred by LUBA in its prior decisions. Therefore, the board will accept testimony limited to LUBA's third assignment of error, which found inadequacies in the hearing official's findings as they relate to the scope and intensity of the Lost Valley Center's non-conforming use, specifically because it is not clear the number of guests, staff, and students that are allowed as part of the use of this property based on the extent of the use during the relevant time period from 1993 to 2013. This remand hearing is the continuation of a 2013 director approval process for which the board will conduct an on-the-record hearing. The original planning director decision was appealed to the hearings official, who affirmed the planning director's verification of the existing use. The hearings official decision was appealed to the board. The board elected not to hear the appeal and affirmed and adopted the hearings official's decision as the county's final decision on the matter. The board will conduct the remand hearing to review and address the issue relating to the assignment of error upon which LUBA based its remand decision. The board may only consider the issue identified in the LUBA decision as the basis for the remand. And this is relating to Lane Code 14.100, Section 1B, Roman numeral 4, and case law Beck versus City of Tillamook 313 or 148, 831 P2D 678, 1992. I will now call for any disclosures of members of the Board of County Commissioners relating to any ex parte contacts or for abstentions due to conflict of interest, ex parte contacts, or biases. And I will then call for any challenges to the hearing authority's qualifications to hear the matter. So with that, I will ask if there are any abstentions due to conflict of interest or ex parte contacts or other biases. Commissioner Senega.
I have none.
Commissioner Buck.
None.
Commissioner Farr.
I have none.
Vice Chair Lovall.
None.
And Chair Lori Trieger, none to declare. Personal conduct for this hearing is governed by Lane Code 14.070, Part 2, which provides, A, no person may be disorderly, abusive, or disruptive of the orderly conduct of the hearing. No person may testify without first receiving recognition from the hearing authority and stating their full name and address. No person may present irrelevant, immaterial, or unduly repetitious testimony or evidence. Audience demonstrations such as applause, cheering, or display of signs or other conduct disruptive of the hearing are not permitted. Any such conduct may be cause for immediate suspension of the hearing or removal of the offender from the hearing. Thank you all for that. I will now turn it over to staff for a staff report.
Morning, Chair and other commissioners. My name is Kevin Gilbride, and I am a senior planner with the Land Management Division. I'm here with you today for a public hearing on a remand from the Land Use Board of Appeals.
Excuse me, Kevin, can you just pull the mic a little closer
Yes.
from behind your laptop, just so Metro can pick it up a little better? Thank you very much. Perfect.
I'm here for the public hearing on remand from the Land Use Board of Appeals of the Lost Valley Center non-conforming use verification and alteration, also known as Planning Action File Number 509-PA13-05201 and LUBA Number 2017-064. The Lost Valley Retreat and Educational Center was originally established in 1969 as the Shiloh Youth Revival Center, and about 30 structures were built on the property in the 1970s for use as housing facilities, dining facilities, a clinic, classrooms, offices, a community store, and accessory buildings. The use and property has changed over time, morphing into a youth revival, or from a youth revival center to a retreat center in the 1980s, and to an education and retreat center in the 1990s up until today, when it became known as the Lost Valley Center. For context, for you all to make a decision on this matter, I think it's important to understand some background and key terms before we move on. Namely, what it and why this is a non-conforming use and the purpose of a remand. Non-conforming use is a lawfully established use that existed prior to the enactment of an ordinance restricting or prohibiting the use. Non-conforming uses are regulated by Lane Code 16251 and ORS 215130 sub 5. And pursuant to ORS 215130 sub 11, the review of the scope of a non-conforming use is limited to a 20-year look-back period immediately preceding the date of application. The look-back period for this application is from 2013 to 1993 because the application was submitted in 2013. In this case, the Lost Valley Center is a non-conforming use because at the time of its establishment in 1969, there were no restrictive zoning or other regulations applicable to the subject property. Designation was not applied to the property until 1974, when the property was designated as a rural woodland grazing property, at which point the use became a non-conforming use because the designation did not allow for recreational, educational, or similar uses. The property was first zoned in 1975 as agricultural grazing and timber, AGT 5, and then was rezoned in 1984 to impacted forest lands F2. In both zonings, churches, schools, and similar activities are conditional uses. As such, because at the time the restrictions for use were applied to the property, the Lost Valley Center already existed and operated lawfully. It was considered a non-conforming use, and in 1991, Lost Valley Center was verified as a lawful non-conforming use and was authorized for an increase in intensity and scope under Lane Code 16251 subsection 3. A remand is an act by a decision maker to send a case from a higher court or decision maker to a lower court or decision maker when they determine that a mistake was made by the lower, or that additional proceedings are necessary. Often, LUBA will remand a decision back to the county when they determine that a mistake or error occurred in rendering the original decision, and such was the case here. The purpose of the remand is to correct that mistake. So the application for the matter before you today was originally a request for a director approval of a verification and alteration of a non-conforming use submitted by the applicant, Lost Valley Center Incorporated, on April 15th, 2013, to re-verify and alter the non-conforming use approved on the subject property in 1991. The director approved the applicant's request on October 28th, 2015, and the application was then appealed to the hearings official who affirmed the planning director's verification of the existing use, but denied the request for alteration and expansion that was previously approved. The hearings official determined that the original 1991 approval had expired and therefore could not be modified. On appeal from the hearings official when passing Order 1706-1306 on June 13th, 2017, the board considered the application before you today for the first time. And on that occasion, the board elected not to hear the appeal. They adopted findings in support of the hearings official's reconsidered decision and affirmed and adopted the hearings official's decision as the county's final decision on the matter. On appeal from the board, LUBA issued a final opinion and order in 2023, remanding the decision to the county. As I stated earlier, LUBA will remand a decision back to the county when they determine that the county made errors in their original decision. And in this case, LUBA remanded the county's decision based on the third assignment of error, the verification of the extent of the Lost Valley Center's scope and intensity. Specifically, LUBA considered that the decision was made in error because it was confusing how the hearings official reached their conclusion on the total number of guests, staff, and students that would be allowed as part of the use. The decision had provided an analysis of the average intensity of the use over the 20-year look-back period from 1993 to 2013, and the intensity of use at the time of the application as authorized by ORS, but then decided to verify the non-conforming use at a level of intensity demonstrated at the time of application in 1991. That was 150 resident students, 35 staff, and 3,000 yearly visitors. LUBA, in their decision, hinted that a proper decision should make clear the number of guests, staff, and students based on the extent of the use during the relevant look-back period, rather than the 1991 date chosen by the hearings official. The applicant filed the remand application with the county on April 4th, and the remand application was submitted without additional argument or analysis. And pursuant to Lane Code 14100 sub 1 sub b sub little I, this remand is placed before the board for decision because the board reviewed that original 2016 hearings official decision. As I previously stated, the issue on remand is that the hearings official made findings regarding levels of intensity of the use from 1993 to 2013 that were less than those verified in 1991, but also confirmed that the scope and intensity of the 1991 decision must be confirmed. More specifically, the hearings official concluded that even though the scope and intensity of the use had reduced over time, that fluctuation was due to business-related conditions, rather than through a conscious decision-making process by the applicant, and therefore it did not have any effect on the approvable scope and intensity of the use. The hearings official's decision did not completely flesh out their justification for verifying the 1991 levels, but they did drop a footnote referencing a LUBA case, Kuntz v. Crook County from 1991, for the proposition that a change in intensity of use does not constitute an impermissible change in use for purposes of determining whether a non-conforming use has been abandoned or interrupted since the time it was first verified. As such, it appears that the hearings official originally justified the continuation of the 1991 levels because the intensity verified between 1993 and 2013 fluctuated due to business conditions and not because the applicant intended for the intensity of the use to fluctuate. However, the hearings official's decision does not investigate or evaluate the business conditions of the use other than to refer to the late 2000s depression as a reason for the fluctuation. LUBA's final order does not consider the hearings official's reliance on the Kuntz case. And although LUBA's decision appears to sidestep the foundational issue presented by the hearings official in relation to the Kuntz case, i.e. that the intensity of a use can change based on economic realities over time, but that involuntary changes do not result in their permanent loss of lawful intensity. LUBA's decision appears to only allow for an examination of the differing levels of intensity of the use during the 20-year look-back period that is statutorily allowable. In other words, LUBA appears to consider that if a different level of intensity of the use existed within that 20-year look-back period, then the use must be verified at that level, regardless of the reason for fluctuations in the intensity of the use. So provided this conclusion, included as attachment 1 of today's memorandum, staff drafted an order that amends the Board of County Commissioners' findings and conclusion to remove the verification of the 1991 levels of the use and instead conclude that the use should be permitted at intensity levels that are based on information from the period between 1993 and 2013 and verifying the use at the level of intensity that existed at 2013. Page 8 of attachment 1 provides the following in findings 39 and 40. Finding 39 states, on remand from LUBA, the board adopts a revised version of Order 1706-1306 that, considering that the scope of the nonconforming use has changed since 1991, permits the Lost Valley Center to operate at 2013 levels, considering average levels of intensity from 1993 to 2013. Specifically, the nonconforming Lost Valley Center use is limited to have 23 staff members and families, 120 resident students, and 2,300 annual guests. Finding 40 states, these numbers are taken from the hearings official's findings related to the current numbers for the period between application submittal in 2013 and issuance of the decision in 2017. Based on the hearings official's findings summarizing the IRS 990 forms submitted by the applicant and supplemental information, conclude that during the period between 1993 and 2013, the center attracted over 2,000 guests during 10 of those years. During only 2 of those years did the number of guests exceed 3,000. Based on those numbers and the other information addressing scope and intensity of use, the board finds that the limitations set forth above are reasonable given the reduction in size of the operation since initial approval in 1991. So, considering the modified findings of the newly drafted board order, as shown on pages 5 and 6 of the staff memorandum, the board can take action on the remand today by option 1, approving the order as written, option 2, by directing staff to revise the order with appropriate findings for a final action that is different than the order presented, or option 3, by moving not to approve the order and remanding the decision to the Lane County hearings official. As a final note, an important consideration for taking action on this item is that remand applications have a statutory time limit in which the county must take final action within 120 days of the date that the remand request was filed. The application was filed on April 4th, 2024, and thus the 120-day timeline ends on August 2nd, 2024. Choosing option 1 and signing the order before August 2nd, 2024 would allow for the decision to fall within that deadline. Thank you, Commissioners, for your time, and this concludes my report, but I'm here to answer questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. Just looking at the script, so we need to open the public hearing and see where, okay, we'll ask questions after the hearing. Thank you for that. So, at this time, I will prepare to open the public hearing. Just check, is there anything Office of County Counsel wants to add to the staff report before I move forward with the public hearing?
No, Kevin did a great job, covered everything that I thought was confusing, so hoping you have a good idea, and then after the hearing, we'll both be here for questions.
Answer questions then. Great, thank you. Okay. So first, we will take any applicant's testimony, and I'm looking at my sign-up sheet. I don't know that it mentions whether they are applicants or opponents. So if I call your name during the applicant's portion and you are not the applicant, please give me a sign, and then we'll come to you during the opponent's testimony. So first, we'll take applicant testimony. Excuse me. We'll allow up to 10 minutes per testimony, plus 5 minutes for any rebuttal. Any objection from the applicant's representative to that timeline? If so, please say it now.
For the record, Zach Mitke, I'm the applicant's attorney. I have no objection to that.
Thank you so much. Tanya, do we have anyone online wishing to participate in this hearing?
Let me check. We do have a virtual hand, so it does look like we have one person.
Okay. Can you please confirm that the person with their hand raised is here on behalf of the applicant to deliver testimony in person? I'm not going to take their testimony this time. I just want to make sure I know where they are in the queue for the proceedings.
Hi, Charles. I have allowed you to talk. Did you hear the question from the chair?
Yes, I'm going to testify in agreement with staff, so I apologize. My internet connection's going a little fuzzy, so I just want to make sure it didn't get lost in the shuffle.
Great, you're just fine. We'll come back to you after we hear from folks who are here in person then. And staff, please flag for me if I'm going out of order or not. It's a little a little confusing. So we're going to take applicant testimony first. And so I'm asking for staff. I see a suggestion of 10 minutes and 5 rebuttal, but then I see testimony for 3 minutes each. So is this the applicant's representative is the 10 minutes, and then anyone else speaking in favor is the 3? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah. So the recommendation is for you to just read those A through H, and so the 10 minutes is for the applicant.
Thank you. Just making sure I understand that before I read it out loud and put it into the ether. I don't understand what I'm reading. Thank you. We will hear applicant's testimony for up to 10 minutes plus any 5 minutes of rebuttal. And then we will hear testimony from other people wishing to provide up to 3 minutes in favor of the applicant. Then we will hear testimony of anyone else. Then we will move into any opponent testimony, if there are any. If there are lawyers or other professionals representing a group of individuals opposed to the application, I will allow up to 10 minutes total for opposition presentation. Tanya, is there anyone online wishing to present opposition testimony, just so I can track in the queue?
I just see Charles online.
Okay, thank you. Back to where I was.
Charles, are you wanting to give opposition testimony?
He had already indicated in favor, so I've got that noted. Thank you, Tanya.
Okay.
All right. Just in case anyone logs on later, there will be an opportunity for testimony of persons opposed to the proposal for up to 3 minutes. Then we'll allow for additional comments by staff and county council in response to the testimony or evidence presented. Then we will allow an applicant's final rebuttal, if any, for up to 5 minutes, and then that will conclude the hearing. So with that, I will open the public hearing and welcome the applicant's representative. Zach, would you please repronounce your last name for me?
Certainly. It's Mitke.
Mitke, great, thank you. Zach Mitke is here to represent on behalf of the applicant. Tanya, if you could please put a timer up for 10 minutes for Mr. Mitke. Thank you. I will invite you to please state your name for the record and address, and then you may begin.
Certainly. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Trigger, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Zach Mitke. My business address is 940 Willamette Street, Suite 400 in Eugene. I don't think I'm probably going to need the full 10 minutes this morning. I believe staff's done an admirable job in summarizing the situation. I don't think I really need to hit those high points again. I will touch briefly on what brings us here 11 years after the filing of the application, and a suggestion, or what I'd call probably a friendly amendment to what's being proposed. But in general, the Lost Valley Center, Inc., my client, supports staff's recommendations in this case. The Lost Valley Center, Inc. operates a retreat and educational facility on approximately 76 acres of land zoned F2. In 1991, the county verified the retreat and educational facility as a non-conforming use and imposed limits of 3,000 guests, 150 students, and 35 staff members and their families. In 2013, Lost Valley sought an expansion of the use, and frankly, just a clarification of the prior 1991 determination. As part of that decision, the county re-verified the property and limits imposed in the 1991 decision. And on September 18th, 2023, LUBA remanded the decision to the county because the hearings official's decision verified the 1991 levels of use, rather than determining, and I quote, the number of guests, staff, and students that are allowed as part of the use during the 20-year look-back period. On remand, staff proposes new limits of 23 staff members and their families, 120 students, and 2,300 guests annually, considering the average levels of intensity between 1993 and 2013. While Lost Valley Center has had higher levels of staffing during the 20-year period, and I believe staff alluded to the fact that in at least 2 years they had guests in excess of 3,000. In addition, more staff and more students during the period leading up to the global recession in 2008. Lost Valley is nevertheless supportive of the modified limits. Lost Valley does request a one-word modification that I've alluded to in some email communication with staff yesterday in finding 39, and this is just for the point of a clarification. There's a reference to 23 staff members and families. I would like to insert the word their families, just to make it consistent with finding 9 in the determination, and clarify that we're talking about 23 staff members and their families, not just any old family. We feel that this is appropriate for the sake of clarity and consistency internally within the findings, and is also consistent with actual numbers of resident staff right now, as well as their families that are on site. With this modification, Lost Valley would support the proposed findings on remand. That's what I have for you at this point in time. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you. Juggling back and forth between documents here. Is there anyone wishing to provide any rebuttal to the applicant's testimony? Tanya, is there anyone online wishing to provide rebuttal to the applicant's testimony? The newly raised hands.
Sorry, my mute was stuck. Charles. Okay, I just have Charles still on.
Okay, and as I understand, he's not rebuttal, so, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear. I think that the explanation of the process might be a little confusing. It was 10 minutes for the applicant. I think the 5 minutes rebuttal is for him to come back in the end. So let's just stick with the applicant and...
Great, thank you then. Yeah. Then, at this time, I will call for testimony of persons in favor. I do have David, looks like Senkovich signed up. Is David in the audience? And are you here to provide testimony in favor of the applicant or in opposition? In favor. Then I'll ask you to please come to the podium. And Tanya, if you would reset the clock for 3 minutes this time.
Well, Commissioners, I'd like to thank you guys.
Excuse me, just 1 moment. Thank you, sir. We're just going to get you a 3-minute clock on the wall. Great. And if you would please state your name and address for the record, and then your 3 minutes will begin. Thank you.
Okay, David Senkovich, 81616 Lost Valley Lane. It's 100 acres at the south end of Lost Valley Lane. It's a timberland, 1 residence. I'd like to thank you people for coming forward and helping with the administration of the county. It's not a very rewarding job that you guys have, but thank you. I'd like to support the work that your staff did. The only thing that I can say that might have some bearing on this is the information that was used to establish what the intensity of use was during that period of time was from a bunch of receipts and such from Lost Valley Education Center. And in going through that carefully, page by page, I found out that out of, I don't know, 300 pages or something like that, there were a lot of duplications where it was in different places a couple of times, which would inflate the numbers. If you put it all together on a timeline, you can see that it was not quite right. However, that doesn't change my view that the work that the county staff did was a job well done and very difficult for them to do. I got involved with this whole thing because in my military background, I did a lot of medicine. And Lost Valley Education Center's sanitation permits say one thing, but in testing the water that comes out of different seeps and wet spots downslope from them exceed clean water standards and violate the stuff. That doesn't really have anything to do with the number of people there, but it is influenced by the number of people. Go ahead.
Excuse me, I'm just going to check with County Council if you would pause the clock. Is this testimony related to the question at hand? And if so, can we continue to hear this testimony on the record?
I would err on the side of allowing it because it sounds like he was about to explain the connection between the sewer.
Just making sure. Thank you.
More people causes more E. coli in groundwater. And another issue, of course, is fire. And more people, more potential for fire. But the bottom line is I support the county's work. They did a very workmanship-like job under difficult circumstances, and I applaud them for that. I'm in support.
Thank you very much for your testimony and your patience with the process. Appreciate that. Next, online, Tanya, we can go to Mr. Woodrow.
Can you guys hear me okay?
We can, and please wait for the clock to reset to 3 minutes. When you can see that, you may state your name and address for the record, and your timer will begin.
Excellent, thank you. My name is Charles W. Woodward IV, and my address is 44 West 35th in Eugene. I'm appearing to basically throw my weight behind the staff's recommendations of the 2/3. That's in line with everything that Luba said in the remand. The only thing that I really want to add to that, there's two things. Number one, in case anybody's curious about the Coons case, it was subsequently modified by a case called Marcon Farms in 1999. And so that's why there's a little bit of disparity. It was disappointing Luba didn't put that in the decision, but nonetheless, where we're headed is still in line with all of the applicable case law, in our opinion. It seems to me that the amendment that Mr. Mickey proposed about having there in front of families seems to be correct as well. The only other thing that I would like to add is in the original hearings official decision, there were some conditions of approval that for some reason were not incorporated in the decision on reconsideration. Some of those conditions of approval, of course, will need to be modified based on the subsequent decisions that have occurred. However, the ones that are still relevant, we would definitely ask to be placed back into the decision as their relevance and their applicability have not been challenged in those subsequent decisions. So unless there are any other questions, that's really all I have. And again, we support the staff's great work on this one.
Thank you for your public comment. And we'll now move to see if there is anyone who wishes to provide any oppositional testimony. I don't have anyone on the sign-up sheet, so I'm presuming not. All right. Thank you. At this time, then, I would allow for any additional comments by staff or our Office of County Counsel in response to testimony and evidence presented.
Regarding the conditions of approval, they should carry through from the original decision to this decision.
Could I ask the audience, please, audience members, if you could step outside if you wish to have a conversation during the proceedings. Thank you so much. Please continue.
Yeah, thank you. The conditions of approval carry through from the original director decision. With the modification of the allowable number of staff members and their families, the residents and annual guests, the change I think we could modify the conditions and submit them to you all before the order gets signed, should you approve it under option 1, and do that before the August 2nd date. Yeah, I think it's just condition 3.
So I'll just add to what Kevin said that he's got the original conditions of approval here, and it's condition approval number 3 that lists the number of staff members and their families, 150 resident students, and 3,000 annual guests. So in a motion, you could, if you wanted to, just amend that condition number 3 to include the new numbers.
The new numbers or the insertion of the word there, right? Yep. And Vice Chair's saying he's got language that he thinks will satisfy when it's time for a motion, so we'll make a test run on that, see if we can get there. Back to. Great. Is there anything else from staff or council in response to testimony?
Just that we're in favor of the inclusion of the word there.
Thank you. Does the applicant wish to make any final, there's nothing to rebut really, so I think not necessary, but checking. In that case, that concludes the hearing. Testimony, arguments, and evidence. Announce opportunities for submission of information appeal. So this is, I'm looking to our county council representative, Ms. Davies. This is to let folks know what opportunities exist moving forward. This item 7 on my script.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it really quickly. Yeah, I don't think you need to read that.
Right, thank you for that. Then, in that case, we move on to discussion and potential action by the board. So the board may ask questions of any of the parties or of our staff to help us deliberate toward a decision. So with that, I will turn it over to the board for any discussion. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any substantive questions other than a question about the motion itself. It sounds like there are 2 items to maybe adjust the board order. One is the inclusion of the word there, and then the other is the addition of the conditions in item number 3 with new limitations. Are those the 2 substantive adjustments to the board order itself?
Yes.
And that should cover it?
Yes.
Okay. That's the only clarification question I had.
Okay. Great. Seeing no other questions or.
I just have a reflection, Chair. I wonder if I'm the only one in the room that can reflect back on the 73 or so when the Shiloh Youth Revival was occurring there. That's right when I moved to Lane County.
Was that when the yellow smiley faces were on the billboards around town when I was a kid? Is that what you're talking about?
It's before that.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure that it's to the subject of the hearing, so we will limit our conversation. And with that, I will look to. Sorry, I'm lost in my agenda. There we are. I will look for a motion.
Chair, I think I've got an appropriate motion. Chair, I'd like to.
Vice Chair.
Yeah, I'd like to move to approve Order 24073006 with the modification condition of item number 3 to read 23 members and their families, and the conditions stated to be also added.
Is that a sufficient motion, Council? I'm not sure that quite gets at it. More specific?
I mean, so the their language is a modification of
The item 39, there was 39 and 3 that I was confused on, so that was 39, I think, originally, right? And item 3 was the condition stated?
Yeah, so
All
I
right,
just
let's
want to be
redo that.
clear that it's condition of approval number 3 from the original conditions of approval. And I think my explanation clarifying this is probably satisfactory. You don't have to restate it. That it's the original conditions of approval number 3, subsections A, B, and C that are being modified by this order.
Thank you, Council. Is there a second to the motion, including the supporting clarifications from County Council?
I would second.
Commissioner Buck, thank you. Any questions? Questions to the motion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Acceptance of the public hearing and passage of Order 24-07-30-06 in the matter of conducting an on-the-record public hearing with the Board of County Commissioners to consider a remand from the Land Use Board of Appeals on a Board of County Commissioner decision, order number 14-06-13-06, that affirmed and adopted the Lane County Hearings Official Reconsidered Decision dated April 17, 2017, and the letter affirming the decision dated May 2nd, 2017, as the county's final decision that approved and denied in part the verification and alteration of a non-conforming retreat/educational facility known as Lost Valley Center. File number 509-PA13-05201, Lost Valley Center, Inc., and a note that order was approved as amended in the presentation with support from County Council. Great. Thank you for that. Thank you all who came to hear the item and support the item. We appreciate you, and we are ready to move on in our agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have an executive session this morning, but before that, we did take care of those county administration items, but we do still have county administration announcements. Are there any announcements from county administration this morning?
Chair Traeger, there are. If I may proceed, this first item is an update on the Charter Review Committee. Because you will be discussing it next week, and this was not noticed as such, there's really no need to discuss, but just to think about some of the questions that have come up here. I'm presenting this at the request of the committee chair, and they have provided the following update. As a reminder, the assignment of July 16th was for staff to bring back a board order on August 6, 2024, including the CRC review with the items and statutes included in the Harangue Long proposal, along with the board suggestions for the formation of the redistricting committee standards, which could be put before the public for a vote in time for the November 5th, 2024 general election. Since the July 16th board assignment, staff and the Charter Review Committee have been hard at work prioritizing this effort. The CRC has been convened and will be holding meetings for the third time today, with a fourth meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. Meetings for 2 hours at each time. Legal counsel has reviewed the Harangue Long proposal and gave the CRC their full legal analysis. To date, all 7 committee members have engaged in robust discussions on many of the components of the Stan Long proposal. They're having productive dialogue, asking good questions, recognizing merits of the Stan Long proposal, and are working to bring forth a revised charter amendment proposal per your direction. It's crucial to note that the hard work of the group, many of whom have full-time jobs, coming together to do what it takes to bring this back to the board. They want to put in the work knowing how impactful this is, yet this work takes time. They are currently reviewing sections in order and are on section 8 of 25, not including the additional commissioner boundary sections. It's worth notice that there is unanimous support among the CRC to not include the 2025 redistricting effort in the future proposal. Given that aspect, the committee also respectfully asked the board if the board could entertain them continuing to work on this for the duration of their term, slated to end October 2024, to allow them to be as thoughtful as possible. Regardless, staff plan to bring an update to the August 6th meeting and are working hard as they can to turn around with a revised amendment board order with the attached ballot title, question, and summary. So again, not for discussion today, but just for consideration, I did want to flag Vice Chair Lovell's compliments for the work. It is diligent. It's my understanding that Commissioner Farr attended as well and had a chance to see for yourselves the diligence with which the team's approaching that work. So thank you. To your comments on the wildfire, we do have an update for you with a general overview. This is from Lane County Emergency Manager Tiffany Brown. Events began July 16th and have grown into 16 fires across 4 complexes. This is early in the season. We've already seen fires in the Siuslaw National Forest, Pleasant Hill, and the Mohawk Valley. Most of the current impact areas are United States Forest Service, with operations managed and the situation monitored via incident management teams across the country. Today, things are relatively calm with little activity over the past few days. At this time, there are no immediate critical concerns regarding residences or infrastructure. There are currently several level 1 evacuations in place for the Lane 1 and the Chalk fires. Long-term strategic planning is occurring across all incidents, and the IMTs are conducting daily briefings, community meetings, and communication has been good overall. There are grave concerns regarding future available personnel. All available teams across the country are currently deployed with timeouts, 14-day terms that begin this week. County staff and sheriff, the sheriff's office, and search and rescue have been heavily engaged across the county with all incidents since July 16 on a number of fronts. They're doing evacuation assistance, emergency alerting, public outreach, and advanced planning. Public health continues to monitor smoke conditions for unsafe conditions about which the public needs to be aware. The emergency management staff has the Emergency Operations Center in a ready state, and the staff are poised to activate as needed at any time. Currently, there are no downstream needs such as evacuation or sheltering. For now, the EOC remains in a warm state, partially activated to support current needs from the public and tactical partners. The emergency manager activities currently include hosting cooperator calls, issuing situation reports, attending community meetings across all complexes, attending partner meetings and briefings, the IMTs, and the Oregon Emergency Management meetings, field periodic requests for information, resources, and coordination for members of the local fire defense board, state agencies, the sheriff's office, and the IMTs. So, thank you for your attention. I think most of you could have given that report as well as I could, given the fact that you have been following this so closely. In other news, we do have great news. The EPA has awarded for a considerable grant. This is an update from the climate program, from the update you received 2 weeks ago. Last week, we received word to the United States Environmental Protection Agency that our $19.6 million application for the Community Forward Grant Program was selected for full funding.
Yes.
The project that our team put forward in concert with United Way of Lane County and other local government partners will invest in 6 facilities across the county to create a network of community resilience hubs. These hubs will support residents in all hazards, ice storms, heat, smoke, and wildfire, and will be available to Lane County Emergency Management for priority use when sheltering space is needed. Further, the grant will enable these 6 hubs to be stocked in advance with necessary supplies, serve as a basis of operation for our Public Health Reserve Corps, who will recruit and train medical and non-medical volunteers, reflective of the local community served in each hub, and to provide enhanced services to their communities every day through this investment. The 6 locations include Florence Senior Activity Center, Veneta Fern Ridge Service Center, Eugene Bethel School District, Fairfield Elementary School Gym, Springfield Bob Kiefer Center, Cottage Grove Community Center and Library, and Oak Ridge Willamette Activity Center. It's a great piece of news, almost $20 million. So with that, that's the end of my report.
Fantastic, thank you. We love to hear it. That concludes the regular business for this morning. As I said, we do have an executive session. It's estimated to take about 20 minutes, so I will read us in, and then I'll give us a few minutes. Is 10 minutes too long? Does that work? Oh, Commissioner Buck, sorry.
I just wanted to make a brief comment before you end us and read us in. You know, that last item, I know you're reading a lot there, but it is extremely important and fantastic to know that was like written by our policy team and was a group effort. They did a fantastic job. They're not only bringing in BRIC grants, but they're bringing in
EPA grants and just really big, big money into our community, and they're worth every penny. And I wish we had more on the team because we could bring in even more money, but I want to thank them for all their work. It is clear that they know what they're doing when they're writing these grants and making a real difference in Lane County.
Thank you for emphasizing that, Commissioner Buck. It's very much appreciated, and you're correct. They're a great team, and they're also the team that will help support the work as it's implemented by our community partners and staff alike. So that was a really important reorganization of staff we already had, but it's the power of creating a team rather than disparate people sort of dispersed throughout the organization, I think, for that coordinated effort and that vision to have us be able to submit a successful application like that. It's terrific.
Trigger, Commissioner Buck, you're absolutely right, and it really is an extraordinary team. It's also a great advantage of the University of Oregon Policy Lab, the fact that we are working together interdisciplinary across agencies in such a team. It really adds up. And the $19.6 million is certainly worth celebrating. The difference it'll make throughout Lane County is huge.
Thank you. Commissioner Seneca?
Yes, it is huge, and just everybody's covered everything. But just real quick, one thing that I could say that meant a lot to these communities was them going out and reaching out to them and say, what works for you? This is what we'd like to do. It went a long ways, So I would just like to say, great job.
Thank you, Chair Trigger, Commissioner Seneca. Yes, we continue to hear from all corners of the county that the fact that the Policy Lab came out and met in those communities to really understand their issues and concerns, we are still getting thank yous from Florence Stokeridge. It's very impressive.
So am I, so thanks. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Farr.
Well, I must state that the one in the Eugene area, Fairfield Elementary, is within steps of, for instance, St. Vincent de Paul's Dusk to Dawn program, within steps of the Lindholm Service Center, within steps of sponsors, for instance, right in the center of the, I just couldn't find a more perfect center than Fairfield Elementary.
With that, I will read us into executive session, and let's call it an 11 a.m. executive session to give us all a few minutes to regroup and refill coffees and whatever else we might need. Today is July 30, 2024. The Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel regarding the rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. The executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are precluded from attending. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. Members of the news media are not allowed to tape, video record, or otherwise record an executive session. Verbatim notes are prohibited. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. With that, we are recessed into executive session.